Hi guys, it's Rach. Today is a perfect day to read a book because right now it's kind of rainy and thundering outside, but I thought instead of reading a book I would sit down and chat about a few books that I have been reading with you guys, because I've been reading a lot recently, so much so that I can't keep all the stories straight in my head, and that's how I can tell I've been reading way too much. But I want to share what I've been reading and my thoughts about them with you guys in another book chat video. So let's get chatting. The first book I'm going to talk about is by Madow. This is called The Secret Diamond Sisters. This is the first in the series and I actually received an advanced reader's copy. It's the first time I've ever gotten an advanced reader's copy and I was really excited, and this book is now out. You can pick it up in stores or online, and I really enjoyed it. I was quite surprised because it's been a while since I've read more of a young adult story, particularly one that concentrates on multiple characters rather than just a couple. This one concentrates on three sisters who have been living in kind of poverty with their mum, who's struggling with a alcohol problem, and they definitely have to grow up faster than most teenagers should. They don't really know who their father is, and when their mother goes into rehab they find out that their father is actually a billionaire who owns a chain of hotels, and they have to move to Las Vegas to live with him. So this is kind of one of these stories where, you know, on a day where you kind of maybe your life is not going great and you just imagine what it would be like if all of a sudden you found out that you had some long lost relative who was actually a millionaire and you all of a sudden got to live this life of luxury like a celebrity. That's basically what happens to these three girls. One is, I think it's 15, 16 and 17 their ages are. They're sisters, and this story basically follows them moving to Las Vegas and meeting their father for the first time and trying to get used to living a life where money is a big important thing and where you have a lot of it, but it also has a lot of strings attached. So getting into this book was a little bit difficult to me to begin with, but by the end I was really kind of invested in the characters, and I'm looking forward to reading the next one. It's definitely a young adult book, so I think it would appeal to people in their teens to early 20s. Definitely probably more girls than guys, but you never know, guys might like this story too. The next book I have to talk about is another one that I have a physical copy of. This one is by Shallvis and it's called Once in a Lifetime. It's one of the Lucky Harbour novels. This is, I believe, number 9. I've read all 9 of them. I really like this story. These are contemporary romance novels. This usually concentrates on one couple, but you do get to hear bits and pieces from previous couples or previous people that you've heard about in the past stories. They come out in lots of 3, which I like, so you kind of have a little trilogy that also relates to the whole entire series. This one I really liked. This one was about a girl who in the past has been conceived as a bad girl, as somebody who got into trouble a lot, has grown up in Lucky Harbour and basically was really misunderstood, and I really kind of felt for her in this story. I have this thing about things not being fair and people being judged unfairly. And this girl, basically you heard about why people sort of looked down on her, and then you hear the reason, like the actual story behind it, and you realise that the entire time, the entire town was really wrong about her. She goes on this journey where she decides that she's probably done some bad things in her life, stuffed up like everybody else has, and she's going to go to and apologise for all the bad things that she did. And along with her little journey, she's also trying to get a bookstore and cafe up and running, which I also really like, because I think that I kind of miss the old-fashioned bookstores. I mean, I know I buy a lot of my books online and read a lot of Kindle, but I think that it was kind of nice of her trying to start up a bookstore, and her uncle, I believe, sort of hired a guy to help refit out an old bookstore, and she kind of falls for him, he falls for her. His friends kind of tell him that she's nothing but trouble, but he kind of sees past what everybody else sees, and they of course eventually get their happy ever after. I'm not going to tell you more, you'll have to read it so you know how they get there, but really good story. I really liked this one. It stood out as one of my favourite Lucky Harbour novels. Would highly recommend it, and Shallvis because she's just an awesome author, one of my favourites. Now moving on to my little Kindle app, the first one that obviously stands out that I want to talk about is Take a Chance by Abbi Glines. I always rave about Abbi Glines' books. I really was excited about this one. This was the next one in the Rosemary or Rosemary Bay, I think it's called, series that started off with the Too Far books. This one is concentrating on Grant and Harlow, and I was really excited because we've kind of heard them and had seen the start of their story in previous books, so I was excited for them to finally get their own story, and I really enjoyed it. It ended on a cliffhanger, which I know that some people weren't super happy about. They weren't very happy with Grant, but I understood it. I still think Grant's an awesome character. I've loved him since the very, very first books, and I'm looking forward to reading the next one. You know that he's going to make up for it. I know that he's going to make up for it, and him and Harlow are going to have more of a story. It's not how they end. So I really enjoyed that one. I would recommend Abbi Glines if you enjoy new adult kind of romance novels. They have steaminess, they have drama, they have really heartwarming stories, and you love the secondary characters and all the other bits and pieces that make up the story. I often stay up way past my bedtime to read her stories. I read a couple of series that actually had a fair few similarities in it. These were more adult romance novels. I read the Real Love series, or 3 of the Real Love series by Melanie Codina. The first one was Love Realized, then we had Love Resisted, and then Love Required. In Love Realized, we kind of see a story about a woman who finds out that her husband is cheating on her at her youngest son's 8th birthday party, which is quite dramatic and quite hard to hear, and I have this big thing about cheating, so it was hard for me to read, and I was getting really frustrated and angry. And this woman in this story was a much bigger person than I was, because she was quite forgiving of her husband, not in the sense that she'd ever go back in a relationship with him, but more so that she still wanted him to be a part of her life on a regular basis for the kids' sake, and that's what happens. And basically we find out that one of his best friends, somebody who they've known since high school, has sort of secretly been in love with this woman for the last 18 years. He's had his son of his own from a brief marriage, and they've remained friends this whole time, and now he finally has his chance for them maybe to get together, and you kind of see that they turn out to be perfect for each other, and they create their own little family. It's kind of about her learning to date again, and to, I guess, realize and take that risk of dating somebody who's been your best friend, because I think that's kind of scary, is to change the relationship status quo, and for the guy to finally get this chance and to at some point see that his chance to finally be with the woman that he's loved for years slip away, and him fighting for her, and to fight for her to realize that they could have their own family together and their own life together. The next book in the series is based on someone that we meet in the previous series. It's actually the sister of the ex-husband, who happens to be best friends with the main female, the wife in the first book. I hope I'm making sense. Anyway, her husband passed away 5 years previously and hadn't really dated or been in a relationship since, and she's finally sort of meets a guy who wants to be in a relationship, and she's resisting it, and he keeps on sort of fighting for her. She's quite a sassy character, and is very opinionated and strong, and he eventually wins her down and finally gets her to go on a date, and you kind of see her slowly falling in love with him and letting go of her past and her guilt over her husband's death. And so that's a really nice story. And then the third book, which is Love Required, is based on the brother of the new husband in the first book, if that's making any sense. You obviously hear about all these characters as you go along, and you meet the family and fall in love with the family, and it's he meets a woman at the wedding of his brother to his new bride. That's kind of a spoiler alert from the first book, sorry guys, but I figured you'd assume that they're going to get the happy ending anyway. He meets a woman who has unfortunately had a bad experience. She has a young daughter, but her husband was abusive and has tried to get away from him, and he falls in love with her and her daughter, and then there's a little bit of drama with the ex-husband getting out of jail and coming back into their lives, but we sort of get to see the story of them fighting to create their own family. All 3 books were really quite interesting, because you found that it didn't matter whether you were related by blood or not, whether the child is yours biologically or not. People will love who they want to love and will create a family out of whoever they create a family with, and I thought that was really sweet. So that is a really long, rambly, I guess, explanation of those 3 stories, but if that sounds appealing to you at all, particularly if you're older and prefer reading about people who are your own age rather than reading about teenagers or people in their early 20s, then I think you would enjoy that series. The other adult romance series that I read was the first 2 books of the Ready series by J.L. Berg. The first one was When You're Ready, and that one was about a woman who had lost her husband to cancer a few years previously, and she basically has this note written for him that says "When You're Ready" on the front, and she doesn't really know, hasn't read it, just sort of carried it around with her. And she happens to meet a new man, the son of a billionaire who's a doctor and who has had his own bad relationship in the past. His wife ended up cheating on him, and he's kind of been sort of playing the field since then. When her daughter hurts herself and ends up in hospital, she meets the doctor, and basically they go from there and sort of start a little budding relationship. He falls in love with Claire, the main woman, and also her daughter, and I guess still feels like he's not quite worthy of a relationship, and doesn't know if he's ready for a relationship. She doesn't know if she's ready to date somebody after the passing of her husband, and it's basically them kind of figuring out what they want out of life and what they want out of life together, and working that out. And then in the next book, Never Been Ready, we meet 2 of the characters we met in the previous book, Leah, which was the best friend of the main woman, Claire, in the first book, and then Declan, who happened to be a friend of, who's an actor and happens to be a friend of Logan, who they've met because they were, well, he's a billionaire, or the son of a billionaire, and Declan also came from money. So anyway, there's a past story, and in the previous book, that Leah and Declan had met, and they actually had a one-night stand, and then basically 6 months had passed, and he still can't get her out of his head, and she can't get him out of her head, and he comes back into town, and it's basically about them maybe trying to start up a real relationship and seeing how that goes, and dealing with the fact that they sort of have different separate lives and separate worlds, and how you deal with that. So both of them are really kind of good books. Again, you could read them standalone, but I think that you should read all stories in order. I'm really stressing that point. I prefer it, and I think that you get the most out of a novel when you've read them in order and have the backstory. It makes it, I guess, more rounded and full and more real in a way. Anyway, I really liked them, would recommend them if those kind of synopses sound appealing to you. And finally, I'm reading a couple of books by Jessica Sorensen. This is from the Ella and Micha series. So there was a couple of previous books, and then there's The Temptation of Lila and Ethan, and The Ever After. I think it was The Secret of Ella and Micha, The Forever of Ella and Micha, then Temptation of Lila and Ethan, and then The Ever After of Ella and Micha. These are really hard to keep straight in my head. 1, because they were so spread out, and then 2, because Jessica Sorensen also has another series, which is the Coincidence of Callie and Caden series, and then there's also a spin-off book from those as well, and there's 3 of those plus the Luke. And honestly, it's really hard when authors release books so spread out and when they name them so similar. I was reading this and getting the Callie and Caden story mixed up with the Ella and Micha story, and I didn't have time to reread it. So that's one of my things. I almost feel like authors should release, as part of like the next book in the series, a 1 chapter size overview of their previous book with spoilers and stuff, so you know exactly how it ended. And I know that authors wouldn't necessarily do that because they write the full book because they want you to read the full book, not to read a 1 chapter size sort of full-on synopsis kind of thing. But when you release books so far apart, I mean, it's more for people who've already read the whole book and just need like a refresher. I just need a few page refresher of what happened in the previous book so I know what's going on in the next book, because it drives me nuts when I can't work out in my head what was going on. Either way, I can tell you that I do like both those series. I really enjoyed hearing about Lila and Ethan's story finally, because we'd met them in the previous 2 books, and it was nice to sort of hear more about their backstory and more about them and how they're potentially budding romance getting together. And then The Ever After of Ella and Micha, again, we're finding that even when we feel like they've got it together and they're perfect, that there may be still some issues, and Ella is still dealing with her depression, and hopefully, I'm not quite at the end yet, but they will eventually get their ever after, their happily ever after. But I would recommend those books. Sorry I can't give you more of a synopsis of them because honestly I can't remember all the details and I don't think I would do it justice, but really good stories. I do like Jessica Sorensen's way of writing and highly would recommend them if you are into contemporary, young adult, or new adult kind of romance stories. Again, they have a lot of drama. The background of these characters isn't the best. They come from broken homes and poverty and things like that, but it's about them trying to, I guess, make their way in the world together. So that is everything that I've read. This has been a really rambly video. I apologize, but hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. Book chats are supposed to be very chatty. It's not a super duper structured review. It's just me sitting down and telling you guys what I've read recently and what I thought about it, and hopefully inspiring you guys to do some reading too. I would, as always, love to hear what you've been reading, so let me know what book you're currently reading or what you've read recently in the comments below and what you thought of it. And other than that, I'm gonna go, and I'll see you guys all in my next video. Bye!